This is the weekly good news roundup from the front with all the good things that have been happening in the courts with respect to this administration. So, how are you all doing this morning, afternoon, evening, tomorrow, depending on where you are? And also, where are you calling in from? I say calling because, I'm an old radio person and I used to do call in shows. I'm just so used to calling it call in. So I apologize for that. But yeah, where are you all calling in or dialing in or substacking in from? And as those of you who have joined me for the weekly roundup before know, I would really love to hear if you have any fun plans for the weekend because, I'm here medically isolating, so I get to live vicariously through you guys. Good morning, Jody from Washington Olympic Peninsula. Oh, Pam, I am. Yeah, thank you very much for that. That I really do think that was one of the best interviews I've given so far, at least on the Epstein stuff. I think that Bob is a great interviewer. He had this amazing background. He was a federal prosecutor. He worked with Janet Reno. In fact, he took down the mob, and then he opened his own practice as a criminal attorney. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, and I did just send this out recently, maybe an hour or so ago. I was interviewed on The Flow, and that just dropped. And The Flow is a podcast that is hosted by Bob Martin, former criminal prosecutor. And now he does this podcast as well as coaching and meditation coaching. So that's quite a quite a switch. San Antonio, Debbie, welcome. Mid Pines, oh, near Yosemite. Hi, Becky. It's so beautiful there. Hello, coffee is life. Here's today's mug. Better take some. Connecticut. Oh, I miss New England. Actually, the reason I live in Boulder in part is because it reminded me so much of New England. You're going to go see The Matrix. Wow. I don't know whether to say good on you or you're kind of behind the times. That's no, really, that's amazing in IMAX. It's going to be amazing. I'm surprised, given that it's an IMAX show, that you weren't saying The Odyssey because that seems to be the hot ticket, no pun intended. But anyway, hey, you're visiting Longmont. Sharon, you are probably 10 minutes from me. So, from where are you visiting? Sharon Sire, who is visiting Longmont. Hey, Jinx. Also, why I'm waiting for Sharon to answer, if she wants, of course, you don't have to answer where you're from, where you're visiting from. I just joined, as an audience member, live through my phone for the first time today because I could not, I couldn't get to my computer. And I found on my phone, it's an iPhone 13 mini, that while I could participate in the chat, I could not see what everyone else was saying. Is that how it usually is when you're on a phone, on an iPhone? Through the Substack app? Wow, say that 3 times fast. Um, or like you guys, I'm sure there's some people here now that are on iPhones. Are you able to see what everyone else is saying in the chat? Hi, Jordan. Okay, I have to let me see. Jordan, I'm trying to see what your profile picture is, but it's just too little, but it looks, is it your dog? Okay, Sharon. You're visiting from Missouri. Oh, Sharon, I'm so sorry that your reason for coming to Longmont is uh, what it is. Although I'm also kind of impressed that we have what you need here. So that's interesting. Okay, so Shannon, you see the chat, but JHK is on an iPhone and can't see the chat. Shannon, are you on an iPhone? Your 2 dogs. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to guess because I see people who are on iPhones who can't see what everyone else is saying, which was my experience. And oh, Sharon, that's really interesting. Wow. I really hope that you're getting what you need, and I'm sorry that you have to travel for it, but I'm grateful, and I'm also really really surprised to hear that it's in Longmont, but I'm glad that it is. Anyway, I'm gonna guess that because different people all on iPhones are having different viewing experiences of the chat, that it depends on probably your version of your OS, probably the actual device, and probably the version of the Substack app that you're using. So, yeah, it could be a screen size limitation, as Jason said. I'm on an iPhone 13 mini, which I is already almost too big for me because I really like to have my phone in my pocket. But in any event, uh, I'm glad it wasn't just me. Could the problem be that the folks are on? No, because I didn't send out a pre-scheduled link. I'm on computer and iPhone 6, and you're seeing the same chat on both. Okay. Yeah, and the thing is that we are so used to doing everything by app now, but I really recommend doing Substack through a web browser, especially watching the live broadcasts or, participating in them. It just makes all the difference. But again, we're very, very used to apps. So here, little rant here, like show of hands, who here really hates it when a service rolls out and the only way you can access that service, whatever it may be, whether it's a shopping service or a dating service or, whatever, they only offer it by app. That just, show of hands if you dislike that, boy, because I sure do. It's the way of things now, but boy, I really don't like that. Okay, so we're gonna wait just a couple more minutes, and then we will get started with today's, weekly roundup of good news, from the front, which there's plenty, and some of it is just delightful. All right, let's get started. And if you will just sort of indulge me, I'm gonna be referring to notes, so I won't always be looking right at the camera at you guys, but I see you. All right. The first thing that we are going to talk about is that the court ordered Trump in the case that he brought against the BBC. And, this was another one of his lawsuits trying to get the media to, kowtow to him and to pay him a lot of money by filing a defamation suit against the BBC. And I think there are maybe 1, maybe 2 things. I guess there's 2 things he apparently didn't take into account. They're related. And one is the BBC is not a US company. I mean, that's really obvious, right? But what that means is the BBC is not beholden to Trump's FCC. He can't threaten the BBC. He can't have Brandon Carr threaten to pull their broadcast license because they're untouchable in that way because they're in the United Kingdom. And so in addition to that, what that meant was that he can't really bully them in the same way. A lot of the media outlets here, when they have been sued by the BBC, uh, a lot of those media outlets, I'm sorry, I'm getting a delivery and it's distracting me because they didn't put it in the right place. Ugh, okay. Anyways, sorry. So the BBC, again, didn't buckle. A lot of the media outlets here when they get this, "Oh, you sued me because you made me look stupid." Like, "No, you made yourself look stupid." But, they roll over because they basically, he has their license to broadcast in a vice, right? Because Brandon Carr is his guy, and the right now, it's basically Trump's FCC. So the BBC did not roll over, and again, Trump is the plaintiff in this lawsuit, and so, as we have often been saying, when one of the lawsuits, instead of being settled, gets to the point of discovery, it's going to be beautiful. And this is what has happened now in this lawsuit. So earlier, I actually purchased for you guys the transcript of the hearing, the most recent hearing that was done by the court in this lawsuit. And so I hope you guys have at least opened it and read it. It was like 159 pages long, but it was wonderful. And it was that hearing upon which this now court order was predicated. And the court it I just like this so much. As you will see or have seen in the transcript, the court was just not having it because Trump's the one that brought the lawsuit, right? He's the plaintiff, and now he is saying, discovery, no, you can't have discovery." Well, yes, they can. So the lawsuit, basically, Trump was complaining that the BBC, in their reporting of January 6th, yep, we're still we're still fighting about that, that it made him look bad. He claims that the way that they spliced together the various pieces of video from January 6th defamed him, made him look bad. Like, again, no, you made yourself look bad, but made him look bad, and therefore he suffered financial loss, great financial loss. He took a hit to his reputation and to his finances. That was his allegation. That is his allegation. And so the thing about defamation, especially of a public figure, like there's just regular defamation, but the standards for being found guilty of defamation of a public figure are are stricter. So not only do you have to have defamed them with something that is untrue, but you had to know that it was untrue, and it had to be with malice. And some of you law nerds or maybe lawyers who are in the audience will remember the infamous case of Falwell versus Hustler. And in that case, Larry Flint had basically insinuated that Jerry Falwell had his first sexual experience with his own mother. And so Falwell, oh, am I frozen? Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm stopping for a moment because I want to know if you guys can hear me. Okay, because someone just said I was frozen. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right. All right. So again, Larry Flint in Hustler intimated in an article that Falwell had his first sexual experience with his own mother, and Falwell sued. And because Falwell is a public figure, and because in this case, basically it was parody, he was poking fun at Falwell. Falwell lost. So that's an example of, because you're a public figure, the standard for finding defamation is much higher. But beyond that, well, let me just get to, okay, so the BBC responded, and the case is moving forward, and now we're in the discovery phase, which is the phase where you're investigating what the other side has. And for those of you who remember My Cousin Vinny, if you remember and you've seen that movie, basically there's that scene where Vinny is saying to Marissa Tomei, "Oh god, I just wish I could see what the other side has." And, of course, she correctly said, "Well, yeah, you can, they have to give that to you." In that case, it was a criminal case, and so under the Brady rule, the prosecution is required to share exculpatory, meaning, evidence that may point to the defendant not being guilty. But even in a civil case like this, you get to serve discovery, which is where I say to you, "Give me all these documents," and I define all the documents in that. That's what discovery is, in part. So anyway, the BBC served discovery on Trump saying, "Turn over your financial records. You are claiming that what we did impacted you financially and caused you to suffer financial harm. So now you get to turn over those financial records that document your financial harm, like either put up or shut up, basically." And so Trump argued, "No, no, no, I can't, And of course, the court rightly said, "Yeah, you brought this lawsuit, put up or shut up." And so again, in the hearing, the transcript of the hearing, you'll read how frustrated and unhappy the court is with Trump. And then this order came out this week, and it basically says, "Yes, Trump, you have to give the BBC all of these financial records. You brought the lawsuit. You have to comply with discovery." Now, if you read for notes from the front members who get the documents, if you read the order, what you will see is two things. The financial records they're seeking and that Trump has been ordered to produce are from one of his foundations. And so you might think, "Oh, well, that's just one entity, he's but this foundation covers more than 400 of Trump's entities. So it's a very, very big deal. The other thing you will see is that it limits it by date to I think it's January 2023. So records from January 2023 forward, but not before that. And so you will see in the order that part of the BBC's request is granted, but then it says part of it is denied. The denied part is only to records prior to January 2023. So this is a huge win for the BBC, and here is what I think will happen. I think that Trump will, A, appeal it, and he will lose on appeal. But I also think he will try to dismiss it now in order to not have to go through with the discovery and the production of his financial records. And I say try to dismiss it because the way that a plaintiff dismisses a case, and we saw this in the IRS case, that bogus IRS case, where he did dismiss it, but then the judge reopened it. Uh, the way that a plaintiff dismisses a case is they file a motion with the court requesting to dismiss it. They don't have the power to dismiss it on their own. And the court can deny that request and will deny that request if the case has already moved forward enough that it would prejudice the defendant if the case were dismissed. So, for example, arguably now Trump has defamed the BBC by saying, "Well, you defame me and blah, blah, blah." So, uh, you know, I think Trump may try to get the case dismissed, and I think the court may not go for it. I think if Trump does file a motion to dismiss, I think the court may say, "Hey, look, dude, you brought this on yourself, and now you have, tried to make the BBC look bad, and yeah, we're not going to let you dismiss it." That is actually my hope. So that is our first good news case from this week, and I'm just looking at the chat. Okay. The next thing this week is oh, I love this so much. This is something that came out in Maxwell's request to have her trial redone or thrown out. It's her habeas corpus petition. and she has filed this petition pro se, which means on her own. Pro se is Latin for I think I'm just as good as actual lawyers and can represent myself. Okay, it's not really Latin for that. It's basically in person, in the first person rather than being represented by a lawyer. But that's what it usually means. Sometimes it means you don't have the money to hire a lawyer and you don't know how to find, free legal assistance. But certainly in Maxwell's case, it's not because she doesn't have the money. So, so she filed this habeas petition, which was basically her saying, "Please reopen my case. There is new evidence." And the new evidence, by the way, part of the new evidence she points to is things from the DOJ Epstein file drops. So that's kind of fun. But anyway, the court is so very clearly so fed up with her. And they basically just let her have it. And here's what happened in this particular case. She filed, uh, first of all, and this is the court document that I sent out to Notes from the Front members, is in all this. All of this is in this, right? The court notes that, first of all, Maxwell publicly filed her habeas petition instead of filing it under seal as she was instructed to do. And the reason that's important is because her habeas petition included unredacted names of victims. And I don't know how many of you already knew that, but the first time I realized that, which is when I was digging into these court records, I was I was aghast because this is a breach of everything that had not been widely reported. But in any event, so first of all, the court is really ticked at her because she publicly filed, and publicly meaning, in other words, she just went through the regular way, the way a lawsuit or a document in a court gets filed is, your paralegal or assistant goes to the court with the documents in hand and just hands them to the clerk of courts to get filed into the case and onto the docket. So instead of filing it under seal, as she had been instructed to do, she filed it just the normal way. And so the victim names were there in her habeas corpus paperwork for all the world to see before the court caught it. So, but now what's happening right now, and the reason there is this court document is that she filed a supplemental memorandum just this week, meaning she filed a supplemental document that has additional information that she wants the court to take into account when it's deliberating on whether to grant her habeas corpus petition. Now that there's nothing wrong with that, except the deadline for filing anything in her case was 7 weeks ago. She blew right past the deadline and filed this document more than a month, almost 2 months late. So the court talks about that a bit in this document that I sent out to you guys. And then you know, again, the judge is really unhappy with her. And then the judge says, and let's see, I want to quote. Um, well, the court says that they're going to accept, the judge says he'll accept the filing, even though it was 7 weeks late, because, and only because, he doesn't want Maxwell to be able to say that the court's failure to accept the document means that the court didn't see this very, very important point in the supplemental filing. And so therefore, that's the only reason that the court didn't grant her habeas corpus petition, which then could also be a reason for appeal. So basically, he's saying, yeah, I'm going to take it, but only because I wanna make sure you don't try and pull a fast one later. But then and now I am quoting from this document that you guys have so you can read it and see and rub your hands with glee like I first did. Then the court says, "Maxwell, however, is not to submit any further filings. Any such filings will not be considered." And I just love that for her because that is a real spanking. That is her being called out, and that is, and that's what she gets for going pro se. I have to say it, again, that there are some people who really need to go pro se, and in fact, often they are habeas petitions. We've seen that from some of the immigrants who have been held, without bond by ICE, and that is how they get themselves in front of a judge, so the judge can say, "Ha ha, ICE, no way, that give this immigrant bond. They're not a flight risk," or whatever. And you may remember from, our last, when we did the, 250th anniversary week of shows, the, the immigration attorney, hang on, Magdalena Cooper's, saying that, there was a decision that said, "No, they can't do that." Now they really do have to give them bond hearings. But anyway, the point is, you might expect, and it would be understandable for a migrant who has no money to file a habeas petition pro se, but not Maxwell. Money is not her problem. I don't really know why she chose to go pro se. It might be maybe there's no attorney that would be willing to represent her because Trump's got them all in his DOJ. I mean, I don't know, but anyway, I love this for her. I love that she got spanked like this. I love that Trump got spanked in the one before. There's just been lots of spankings this week, and it is wonderful. Okay, let's see. Thank you for waiting because yeah, I need me my coffee. Let me just say a thank you to all of you Notes from the Front members who, your $5 a month really genuinely helps me with, definitely with purchasing the transcripts and with being able to do all the research and investigation and writing and reporting I do. But above all, it keeps me in coffee, which I need to do all that other stuff. So thank you for you doing that, guys. Okay. This is the one that I think is probably the most important one this week because I needed to be sure that you understood that the way it was being reported, which was, "Oh my god, now it's gonna happen. Oh my god, Trump's gonna get his way," is not at all the case. And this is the Court of Appeals decision or opinion on Trump's executive order about mail-in balloting. So what happened was that Trump's executive order trying to rein in mail-in balloting, or as I call it, the "I hate mail-in balloting" order. That's a quote, like Trump hates mail-in balloting. The lower court issued an injunction or chose sorry, the lower court refused to issue an injunction against the executive order. But the reason the court declined to issue that injunction was because the executive order hadn't it wasn't ripe. And ripeness is a legal doctrine which basically means the court cannot take jurisdiction of a case and decide on it if it's speculative. If it's if the plaintiff is asking for an injunction against something that not only hasn't yet happened, but might not even happen, and that, well, it might happen if this particular condition is met, it's all speculative. And so the lower court said, we can't issue the injunction because this case is not yet ripe. It doesn't mean that the mail-in balloting executive order has to go into effect and the post office has to stop, delivering mail-in ballot. It doesn't mean it has to go that far, but it has to be more than just speculative. And so the plaintiffs appealed that ruling, probably knowing that the appeals court would uphold the ruling of not giving them the injunction, but you always appeal. It's basically, in a lot of cases, appeals are almost they're gonna automatically happen because in some of them, it could be malpractice to not appeal. Like, just generally speaking, especially if you are in a federal court system, if you're gonna appeal. That's just what you do. So the Court of Appeals affirmed this denial of granting the injunction. But, oh, such a big but. Okay, that sounded really bad. The Court of Appeals denied it because the case was not yet ripe, but they also telegraphed repeatedly what they would likely do with the case when it came back up on appeal, if it did, when the issue was ripe. They said repeatedly let me see, I want to quote, they repeatedly brought up the fact, in fact, I'm gonna directly quote here, if you guys will indulge me while I read this. The action the executive order contemplates would involve the president, whom the Constitution vests with no express authority over the conduct of elections, undertaking a substantial and unfunded overhaul of election procedures, including the implementation of a nationwide reform to Postal Service mail handling processes on the threshold of the November election. Now, I'm still quoting here. Put differently, the order may not prove feasible to implement in any manner whatsoever, at least before the 2026 election. And there's still more. They continually talk about how the executive order says, to the extent legal and consistent with law. This is them basically saying, yeah, that's not going to happen because it's not consistent with law because, for one thing, the president doesn't have any authority over the states how they do elections. And then at the end, and this is what I want you to take away from this case, because again, all over social media, the social media accounts, especially the anonymous ones, by which I mean the ones where, like, when you, for example, if you go to Jay Quo, you go to Heather Cox Richardson, you come to me, we put our name on what we put out there. We take responsibility for what we're saying. The buck stops with us. But these anonymous social media accounts that have hundreds of thousands of followers and are fomenting basically viral fear, you have no idea who's behind them and who's writing. You don't know. For all you know, in fact, it's probably quite likely that some of them are using ChatGPT. So anyway, so this is really important because those types of accounts are fomenting that viral fear, making you think like, oh my God, this Court of Appeals, affirmed the court not issuing the injunction. And so, it's going to happen. And anyway, here's the end of that appellate decision about this order. Quote, given the executive order's repeated commands for agency action to conform to the law, this court cannot assume that the agencies will impose such late-breaking disruption on the state's conduct of the 2026 elections. Boom. All right. Chris, that's not true. They try to get away with much as they can with the law, but they when held to account, they follow the laws. They may try to break them, but when the courts smack them around, they actually they certainly follow the court orders. I can count on one hand the court orders, which are law, that they didn't follow, and they were all at the very beginning of the administration having to do with immigration. So I want to reassure you, Chris O, that in fact, if the court issues an order, they follow it. So anyway, does anyone have any questions about that? Because that's just, it's so important. It is so important to have this misinformation uh, being combated because people get really afraid. And, I recently came across this term and I really, really love it, viral fear, because that is exactly what those social media accounts and the administration themselves are spreading. It's viral fear. So take that take that home and and use it to combat misinformation that you find online because they want us demoralized because then we won't go vote. They want us to feel like, "What's the point? My vote doesn't count," and maybe there's going to be federal agents at the polling places. By the way, they are not allowed to have armed federal agents near polling places. That's a whole part of the states control the election thing. So, okay. Oh, yeah, this is a really fun one too, our next one, and I think it might be our last one. No, it's not. We have 2 more, 2 more things to cover. So I'm gonna take another sip of coffee, see if there are any questions, and oh, and for those of you commenting on my mug, thank you very much. I try to entertain you with a different mug each time. I mean, I don't have an unending supply of mugs, but you know what I mean. So there you go. Okay. So last year, when no one was still in charge, she canceled the collective bargaining agreement with the American Federation of Government Employees. They happen to represent, among others, the transportation security, so the right TSA officers. Oh, hang on a minute, let's see. Oh, okay. So, now a collective bargaining agreement, another word for that is a contract, and you can't just cancel a contract. Not even the government gets to just cancel a contract. But moreover, of course, there are federal regulations like the Administrative Procedure Act and other laws that make it so that even though they have been trying, they can't just cancel something. And so in February of last year, Nome signed, I wouldn't call it a secret memorandum, but it wasn't a public memorandum. I would say that they just didn't bother to let the public know about it. And that memorandum included that it was canceling the collective bargaining agreement with the what's the acronym for it? The American Federation, AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees again. So the AFG brought this lawsuit against Kirsty Nome. And now, of course, her successor is Mark Wayne Mullins. And so now the case is he is now the defendant and his agency. And so what happened was she issued this memorandum in February of 2025. So in March, the AFGE brought this lawsuit saying, hey, they can't do that. And while it was going on, in September, she issued a new superseding memorandum. So it addressed the same issues, uh, but she claimed that now, because there's a new memorandum that supersedes the memorandum on which the lawsuit was brought, are you following this? That now the issue was moot because that original February memorandum was no longer in effect because it was superseded by this new memorandum issued in September. The thing is, that new September memorandum still had the exact same language that was objectionable and on which the lawsuit had been brought as the original memorandum. So, the court, and of course now it's like July, so there was an injunction against this memorandum going into effect. And then just this week, or it might have been last week, the court heard, the case and basically first said, case law says that no, if you issue a superseding document, and particularly if it has the same objectionable language as the preceding document, that doesn't moot the case. But moreover, and this is the part I love so much because this administration keeps doing this, they make themselves openly stupid. They put stuff in their legal pleadings that I can't count anymore how many times they've put something in their responding documents that actually proves the plaintiff's case. And so in this particular case, the administration, Mark Wayne Mullen, who had stepped in for Kirsty Noem, in their document saying, well, yes, this case is moot, and here's why. They cited case law that they claimed supported their position that the superseding document made the case moot. When in fact, okay, let me see if I can find the judges. I want to quote. All right, I didn't do the actual quote, but anyway, the case that they cited for that proposition that because there was a superseding document, the case was now moot, actually says that when the superseding document still addresses the original action that was, on which the foundation of the lawsuit, that it does not moot it. I said that poorly, but basically, the administration's claims that the particular case and case law supported their position actually supported the plaintiff's position. In fact, the court even says that, that this supports the plaintiff's position. So you're stupid and you don't know how to be a lawyer. And the plaintiff, in this case, the AFGE, still gets to have their injunction and the case has not been mooted. So, and as I said, because I'm clearly not saying this well, so I'm going to read what I said when I sent this out to you guys, is that, first of all, the court said, quote, "The challenge stays live when the relevant challenge condition had been reiterated in the agency's replacement decision." And then I said, in other words, if you replace a challenged and enjoined rule with another rule that contains the same objectionable language that got it enjoined in the first place, of course it doesn't moot the case. But somehow, even though I am sure that is obvious to all of you, somehow it was not obvious to the pathetic or perhaps just overworked and inexperienced lawyers at the DOJ. Okay. Coffee is life. Not only is that what happens when you fire all the experienced litigation attorneys, but when you didn't anticipate that now all those experienced attorneys were going to go work for agencies on the opposite side of you. Okay, this is our last one. And gosh, I love this too. Maybe it's just me. I know I'm really weird. Like for you lawyers out there, I will cop to the fact that when I was in private practice, I was really sick because my favorite part of the practice of litigation was drafting discovery. Most lawyer or a lot of lawyers really hate discovery. I loved it. So that apparently, according to my colleagues, made me pretty sick and twisted. But in any event, here, and this is, I just, these things just make my heart, and yes, I really do have one despite being a lawyer. It make my heart, if my little black heart just go pitter pat. So I really am very enthusiastic about these things, probably more than I should be. So Trump's bogus IRS lawsuit. First, I am going to remind people for things. Oh, wait a minute. Eric says every time I stop for coffee, he gets the urge to go get some of his own homemade cold brew. Eric, I would like to invite you to bottle your homemade cold brew and send it to me. Okay, so a quick refresher about the bogus IRS lawsuit because it's easy, I think, to forget it's what we call procedural posture and where it's at, and where its tentacles are at. And by that, I mean the tentacle of the slush fund and the tentacle of the purported uh, uh, blanket immunity to Trump from IRS audits. So, to remind you all, and yes, Deborah, I would love to do a live with Glenn Kirshner. I have 2 people I would like to do a live show with together, not at the same time, Glenn and also Joe Walsh. So, okay. Um, so Trump filed this lawsuit against the IRS claiming massive amounts of financial, sanctions that he wants to be awarded because of the leak that happened of his tax returns. To really make it clear on this position, he sued his own agency, the IRS, because he's the president, and the federal agency's defense law department is the DOJ. In other words, when an agency gets sued in the federal system, the department that defends them is the DOJ. Now, Trump filed the lawsuit in Florida as a private citizen. So, in theory, okay, on paper, maybe they could say, "Oh, there's no conflict of interest. This is me as a private citizen suing this federal agency." I mean, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous on his face, and everybody knew it. So he filed this lawsuit, and then, as you may remember, like, there was nothing else that happened in the lawsuit other than, at some point, Trump filed to dismiss the lawsuit. And he filed the request to dismiss it with prejudice, and that means with prejudice means he can't bring the lawsuit again. Without when a plaintiff has a lawsuit dismissed without prejudice, or if a court dismisses it on its own without prejudice, that means the plaintiff is free to bring the lawsuit again when, different things have been discovered or whatever the case may be. When it's dismissed with prejudice, it means the plaintiff cannot bring it again. Now, in my entire practice of law, teaching law, decades long, I have never seen a plaintiff request that their own lawsuit be dismissed with prejudice. Courts will dismiss a lawsuit with prejudice because they're fed up with the hijinks that the plaintiff has attempted. But I have never seen that happen. So immediately my spidey sense went up, and some of you will remember that. Then the next day is when the supposed settlement agreement came out, which was to create the slush fund. And then the day after that, or I may have the days flipped, came this alleged immunity agreement, so that it said that There would be no prosecution or audit by the IRS of the plaintiff or any of their family. And that's really important because I believe, in my opinion, there was no plaintiff. The point of that supposed immunity thing was it doesn't say Trump anywhere in that document. It refers to a plaintiff. And at the time that it was signed, there was no plaintiff because Trump had dismissed his lawsuit previously. So, for one thing, I think it fails for that, just from a legal perspective. Uh, and then also for a lot of other reasons, which, if it were ever to be litigated, I am confident that it would not stand. But then there was also that other document, this purported settlement agreement between the President of the United States and his IRS that created the slush fund. Okay, so are you with me so far? In this case, this whole thing has so many unusual aspects. In a very unusual action, 35 former federal judges requested to be added to the case as non-parties and then filed a motion along with supporting documents asking the judge to please reopen the case. Now, one of the things you need to know is that when the judge granted Trump's request to dismiss the case, in her order dismissing it, she made a big point of saying, there is no settlement in this case. There have been no settlement discussions. She put that in her order, and I know that was because she understood that he was trying to pull a fast one. So she made a point of saying there have been no settlement discussions, there's no evidence of a settlement, and there is no settlement in this case, right? Then she dismisses the case, and then after she dismisses it, this purported settlement comes out. And at the top of the settlement paperwork, they include the caption for the lawsuit, and the caption is that part where it says, "Here's the plaintiff, here's the defendant, here's the court that it's in, all of that, here's the case number." So, there was no case anymore, and yet Trump put out this settlement that supposedly was within the purview of the case with the caption at the top. Have I lost anyone? You guys following? It's pretty convoluted. Okay. Anyway, so I knew the moment I saw that, it was basically saying, this is something that's been approved by the court. This is a settlement approved by the court or submitted to the court. And yet the court 2 days before had said there has been no settlement, no settlement talks. So again, very hinky. That's a legal term. The whole thing is just so ridiculous. And so those are the reasons that I am confident that even if it were attempted to go forward with the slush fund or that immunity thing, either one would be quickly struck down by a court. But anyway, so far you're here, right? You're with me? This week, the 35 judges, remember them? They're the ones that got the case reopened. The 35 judges filed to request reimbursement for their expenses. Now, the judge, when she issued her most recent document in the case, had made a point of saying that these judges are entitled to request money, basically, right? And so the judges did. And they put together this document. They requested, they filed as the 35 judges. And in addition to that, a whole bunch of former government officials got together along with some public interest groups, and they filed an amicus brief to support the 35 judges asking for reimbursement. And so now there is this request for reimbursement. And the thing is, that the judges say that even though they would be entitled to more than $100,000, all they want is $1 for each of the law firms that represented them. And also they're asking for actual fees that the attorneys incurred, which are about a little over 4,000 to $4,500. But the point is I want to bring up is that they said, "We are entitled to, over $100,000 for, everything we did to get this case reopened, but we only want $1 each for the law firms that worked with them." So why would they do this? Well, in part, it was to demonstrate in the documents and to the public and to Trump that they got into it because it was the right thing to do, because what Trump was doing was so egregious that they needed to take action. But also, it's a big in your face to Trump. It was letting Trump know and letting the world see that he was ordered to pay something, which made clear, first of all, that we're asking for money, but it's not about greed because we're only asking for this dollar. Uh, but to rub in Trump's face that he lost this action, that they were onto him, that the court is pissed at him, and that they want to make sure that everybody knows Trump lost and is ordered to pay something. So, excuse me. So that's a great way to end the week, don't you think? And yeah, I'm seeing a lot of chat now in a lot of chat in the chat, talking about Tillis and Cronin, that they were not going to confirm Blanche, because of the whole slush fund thing, because he refuses to put it in writing. It doesn't matter that he refuses to put it in writing, because it will get litigated if it tries to move forward. But I'm actually really glad that he is refusing to put it in writing, because it gives them an excuse, a reason to not confirm him. So anyway, that is it. Any questions about anything we covered? I know it was a lot, and I was not fully on my game because, again, I have not had enough coffee yet. But and again, I really want to thank my notes from the front members. You just really can't imagine how much your $5 a month means. It really does help. It means a great deal. If you're not a notes from the front member, that is the best way to support my investigating and research and writing and purchasing documents. But, and it's $5 a month and you get all of the court documents and everything else. But if you can't do that, or even if you can, but you just for some reason don't want to, I'm still very, very grateful to you being here. It makes a huge difference to me, because in part it lets me know that maybe I'm making a little bit of a difference. So, okay, I'm seeing question marks. How long can Blanche remain acting attorney? That is unclear. It depends in part on, um, first of all, whether his nomination is actually pulled or just paused, and and some other things that I honestly don't know is the answer. I think that it's more likely that he will go down before any legal restriction on how long he can be there. So no worries that you're late, Teresa. I've already sent out the article that is the week in review, and of course, this will be available later as an instant replay video. If anyone wants that, I will send that out. Uh, so yeah, Dar, thank you. Yeah, Dana is so wonderful, and I just love her. So that was really fun for me too. Okay, guys, I think that's about it. So go out and have a great weekend. Do something fun. Stay safe. And thank you again. I really appreciate you being here. Bye for now.